This is the Jeff McLeod Show, where we talk about God, America, the things that make our country great, and so much more. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've had a great weekend and a great Monday so far and a great start back to the work week. This is the Jeff McLeod Show. Today we're going to be discussing a variety of topics. The first one and most notable is going to be the shooting that occurred yesterday at an LDS church in Michigan. I'm going to be giving my opinions about the Second Amendment, as well as gun control and what we can do to prevent these murders, as well as the systemic cause of all these shootings that have been happening lately. So let's get started. So yesterday, a group of worshipers were shot at, and a man first plowed his car into the church. He then proceeded to open the door of his car and start shooting people. I can't imagine, as somebody who goes to church, I'm actually recording right now, and it's the night before this video releases, and I can't imagine. I just got back from church. I can't imagine going into a church service and somebody coming in and plowing their vehicle into my church and start shooting at everybody. I just can't imagine it, and it's a terrifying thing, and it's everybody's worst nightmare. And unfortunately, it happened to a group of people in Michigan who I don't believe how they believe, and we're completely different from our belief system, but they just wanted to peacefully worship and go to church, and a man wanted to commit acts of violence against them. And you might be wondering, those of you that are watching, why is all this violence happening? Some of it, I believe, is obvious. There's obvious tension right now between the right and left, and it's just creating this, there's animosity between both sides. The right really disdains the left, and the left disdains the right. You're seeing that with the Charlie Kirk incident. You've seen that also. There was that stabbing down in South Carolina, I believe, or North Carolina, one of those two states. So there's been a lot of bad things that have been happening lately around our country. And to be honest with you, right, it seems pretty scary. But there's underlying root cause to this. And the root cause is that we are a godless society. So our founding fathers never intended for America to be an immoral society. Granted, many of them did not know Jesus as their personal savior, but they did not want our country to be an immoral society. All of them had a moral framework. They believed in the Bible strongly and the principles behind it. Even such people as Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, who were deists, they really valued the principles of the Bible. They might not have believed in the miracles, but they believed in the principles of the Bible, and they tried to apply it to their lives. In fact, 59, I believe, of the 60 signers of the Declaration of Independence, I believe I got that number correctly, they all expressed a belief in the divine. Nowadays, it's way less. Probably maybe 50% of the country at best would say they believe in God or have a fear of God. And the problem you're having nowadays is we are relying on a quote-unquote constitution that was established in morality and concepts that were rooted and grounded in biblical truth. And now what's happened is we have a society that for 60 years now has kept God out of our educational system. We have a society that has voted 50 plus years ago for abortion, and I know Roe v. Wade was overturned, but most states still have it on the books, right? Or they have some sort of abortion on the books. We voted for lifestyles that God condemns. We voted for that people could be whatever they want to be, and as a result, there's total disorder, there's total chaos. What you have to understand is when you don't respect God's moral law and you have no fear of God, what's going to happen is chaos. And because everybody does that which is right in their own eyes. People say, follow your truth. And a lot of people following your truth means I'm going to eliminate anybody that disagrees with me, right? Because if you follow your truth, we all have different forms of truth if we rely on ourselves. We essentially, in that scenario, become our own gods because we're the ones that get to decide what's right and wrong. So where all these shootings are coming from is we have a number of people who don't value human life, who believe that everything revolves around them and their viewpoint, and that basically they're their own God. So when Charlie Kirk was shot, oh, he's such an evil, wicked person because he relies on the principles of the Bible. Really? That's why he's an evil person? It's because these people are all being taught, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're great, you're great, you're great, and you have a standard for your own truth, and you live out your own truth. You follow your own heart. You go where your own heart leads you. And as we can see, our own hearts when we don't trust, we don't have a biblical framework or some sort of moral framework, our hearts take us into a terrible place. And any person is guilty of committing anything. I want to say that. And if you're somebody that is morally grounded, you have a higher likelihood of not ever doing that because you're standing firm. But people that are deranged, people that are just absorbed with their political ideology and following their truth, they commit acts of violence. And we don't know the motives yet. I'm going to discuss a few of what I think they could be later on. And I'm not going to try to get overly political because we really don't know. It doesn't seem to be a clear motive in this case. But the reason we're having all these gun crimes and gun violence is because man has a sinful heart. And it doesn't matter if you take away the guns, there's still going to be knives. There's still going to be fists. There's still going to be other forms of murder. There's still going to be people will be able to make bombs still, homemade bombs, right? People, like they did on 9/11, will be able to use box cutters. So no matter how much you try to remove weapons, it's the evil in man's heart that causes all these issues. And we have to realize we have to get back to biblical Christianity, to a biblical framework, to an understanding of what made our foundation great. And you don't even have to believe the Bible, right? I'm an ardent Bible believer and follower, but you don't have to believe the Bible to at least believe in its truth. And we've gone so far from that in this country that it's devolving into chaos. And we're seeing a society right now where it's so fractured. It's probably the most fractured it's been since the 60s. And if I'm making a major exaggeration, it might not even be a hyperbole, all the way back to the Civil War. We are very, very divided and divided on different issues today. So we need to get engaged again. The Bible talks about freedom and having the freedom to be able to speak and proclaim the truth. And we need to get back to that in our country. So let's get in and talk about the shooter. During these mass shooting events, we often see the best and worst of mankind. So it's coming out now that there were many heroes at this church who decided to shield children. I don't know if any of them gave their lives. I'm sure a few of them did. But they decided to shield children, shield people who were important to them, and they save lives. And you see the best of mankind. You also see the opposite end. Thomas Jacob Sanford, who committed the crime, is an example of the worst of mankind. At the same time, there are individuals in the crowd who shielded children, and then there was a shooter who decided to drive his car into this church building, get out, and start firing at people. I can't even imagine what would get into somebody to want to do that. And I'll talk about a few motives, like I mentioned already. I'll talk about a few motives later. Thomas Sanford was the man police said crashed his truck into a Michigan church and then set it on fire and shot churchgoers in a violent attack. It's come out that he's a former Marine. So he was pretty distinguished. He had several medals. It wasn't like he was dishonorably discharged or he had some form of mental illness, which now is very apparent. It seemed like he served honorably. And he obviously planned this out because he set the church on fire, rammed his truck through the front, and started shooting at people. So he's trying to maximize fatalities as much as possible from what he did. Literally, he's trying to burn the church down on top of these people. He's trying to shoot people, and he also drove his truck into the building, which is obviously very dangerous. So he committed 3 different acts of violence, and all of them could have killed individuals. And ultimately, it's coming out right now that at least 4 people are dead and 8 are critically wounded. They're saying that they could find more bodies because of the fire, bodies that were just left in there. And it's a shame that these people had to die. So I don't know if he had something against the LDS church, if he had some sort of political ideology, some motivation, maybe hatred against somebody in that church, or maybe even some sort of PTSD. I don't know what he had. But that being said, he served from 2004 to 2008 in the Marines, and he was deployed in Iraq in Operation Iraqi Freedom. So he worked as an automotive mechanic and a vehicle recovery operator. So he had a pretty good history. When you look back at his past, there was no, as far as we know right now, there were no acts of violence. He wasn't court-martialed. He didn't go to prison. He wasn't dishonorably discharged. It wasn't even that he had 0 record. He actually had a good record. He obtained the the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, the Marine Corps Good Conduct Medal, the Iraqi Campaign Medal. So he had a number of different medals and served with distinction while he was in Iraq. So it's very ironic and strange that he decides to take this attack out on a church building. So obviously there is a pattern. So we've talked about in previous episodes, recently there's been a pattern of transgenderism and that form of mental health illness. There's also been the pattern in years past of ex-military members committing acts of violence because ultimately they do have the know-how, because this guy was stationed in Iraq and unfortunately he had the know-how to kill. So here are some motives we're going to examine. I briefly mentioned a couple already. It'll be interesting to see what set him off. Was it an individual in that church building that he had a disdain for? Was it that he didn't like conservatives? Because it is known that most Mormons are conservative. If you find that offensive, I'm sorry, whatever, it's LDS. But a lot of them are conservative. So did he take it out on them because they're a conservative group? I don't know. Maybe he was more liberal and they were conservative, but at this point it's just conjecture. Did he have PTSD? What soldiers saw, and I've talked to some Iraqi war vets throughout this year. I talked to a man who was a veteran, not in the Iraqi war, but a war in the Middle East in the 80s in Lebanon. Talked to a man who went to Iraq, a couple different individuals, and it was very traumatic. I know two of them that have PTSD. So maybe he was dealing with undiagnosed PTSD that made him go insane. I have no idea. That's possible because what you see in war, it really can mess your brain up, because you see a number of people die and you become desensitized a lot of times to death, or you become overly sensitized to it where you can't deal with anything anymore and you're just going to crack up, and it's understandable. And once again, I want to say I applaud all those who have served in our armed forces. Thank you for your service. We would not be here, and I genuinely mean that, without your sacrifice and support. I get up every single day and I thank God that I'm an American, and I am an American because of the people who went before me, the people who are in active combat now or on duty or stationed in the Middle East. I'm so thankful for them, because without them, I wouldn't be able to be here recording a podcast. We wouldn't have presidential elections. We wouldn't have capitalism. We wouldn't have the freedom that we enjoy. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your service. And it's sad that these soldiers have to deal with things the rest of their lives. Seeing children blown apart from bombs, right? Having to shoot at children in the Middle East because they're carrying explosive devices that could blow the child up, as well as our troops. And evil terrorists will purposely send children out so that you have to shoot the child or you all die. So there's terrible things that people have to deal with PTSD, and maybe this guy had to deal with that. I don't know. Regardless of the outcome, we all know that people on the left are going to be calling for gun restrictions. That's always a given. So I haven't really talked too much about my opinion on gun control, but I'm going to talk about it today. I will admit, being completely honest, and I think that's what I strive to be here, I'm from a blue state, New Jersey, where it is actually incredibly difficult to get a gun, especially a concealed carry. So I'm not somebody that goes to a firing range necessarily or enjoys it. And I actually used to be a little bit more liberal on my gun stance, and it's evolved and it's changed over the last couple of years. So as somebody who doesn't hunt and doesn't really shoot at a firing range, I don't know a ton about guns, but I do know statistics about guns. And I want to get my concealed carry. I would like to be able to practice to be able to defend myself and my family in case we ever were robbed or something terrible like this happened at church. It would be great to be able to have a concealed carry. But here are some statistics right now. Did you know that there are approximately 30,000 gun deaths a year in the United States? That's a lot. And I'll admit it, that is a real lot. So, most of those gun deaths, being honest, so when we study them, they're by suicide. So if you were to guess, you're probably going to think maybe 10,000 were from suicide. It's actually 20,000. So approximately 10,000 of the deaths committed per year by gun are through homicide. So it's about 1/3 of the total number of gun deaths. And most of the suicide deaths are committed with a pistol. That's going to be relevant piece of information later on when we're discussing guns and my views on guns, gun restriction, and gun control. So of those 10,000 homicides per year, about 609 are by guns other than pistols. So really, really small. So less than 10%, about 6% of the gun deaths that are by homicide are committed with guns that are not pistols. So we're going to be discussing a little bit. There's going to be big talk, I know, about with politicians over what's gone on over the last few weeks, that we need to have some sort of gun control or gun ban. And I'm going to discuss how it's very difficult to actually enact in the United States, especially. And I'm also going to discuss how it would be inefficient. There's not going to be any efficacy in doing that. It's not really going to solve a ton of problems. So most of those deaths, 10,000, are committed by gangs in inner cities, right? Gang deaths and gang violence. Ultimately, now I'm a little sentimental because that's the last thing Charlie Kirk talked about, but it's true. Gang violence is widely attributed to most of these deaths per year. So most liberal politicians are going to come out and say, because this man probably had some sort of assault rifle, and whether it's a rifle, whether it was could hold many bullets, had a large magazine capacity, whatever the case is, they're probably going to come out and say we need to ban assault rifles. So there are some major issues if you ever hear this. So if you're in the audience, you're listening right now, here's some things to keep in mind. What is an assault rifle exactly? It's different for every politician. Remember how I was talking in the beginning of the podcast, Your Truth? This comes into Your Truth. So it's, what do you think an assault rifle is? So for some people, assault rifle could be the magazine capacity. So they want to restrict the number of bullets in the capacity of a gun. For other individuals, it could be the caliper of the type of gun. Maybe they want to ban larger calipers. Maybe it's silencers that they want to ban, and they've used something with a silencer as an assault weapon. Maybe there are just so many, like, I think you're understanding it. There are just so many little idiosyncrasies that you see that you see with guns and the term, and I have it in quotes in my notes, assault rifle. It's very, very, very subjective. So it would have to be defined what an assault rifle actually is. A few years back, by the way, awesome President's mug, so you can check that out and Google it online. It's the only one I could find, and I'm a tea drinker, so right, and it keeps my voice going. But so you can do some research, but assault rifle, there's no definitive definition of what an assault rifle is. I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story and how I've evolved a little bit over the years. So I stated that I'm a blue state Republican. So I originally was not super pro-gun. I would have been for people having pistols, being able to have rifles. But where I would have been at is I would have said there should be some sort of magazine limit. This is me probably 3 years ago. I would have said there should have been, what's the point of having an AK-47? And my stance has pretty drastically shifted over the last couple years. Number one, we don't have an armed militia. So some people like bringing that up from the Constitution. We don't have an organized militia. However, the founding fathers, I don't know if they even envisioned having necessarily a super organized militia, but people that were capable of defending themselves. And in case of a war where there was an enemy invader, they were able to get together and organize, because that's what they were doing during much of the Revolutionary War. They're just getting these untrained people together and forming units and having them fight the British. So their intention was for us to be able, if we were ever invaded, in the case that ever happened, hopefully it never does, we would be able to defend ourselves. So there's a couple things that have changed my mind. Israel was attacked by Hamas, right, on October 6th, 2023. So nearly 2 years ago now. It's crazy. It was almost 2 years ago, and it's still ongoing. And none of those individuals in Israel, in southern Israel, were able to have high caliber gun. They didn't have high magazine capacities. They were not allowed. And if they were allowed to have AKs and they were allowed to have better guns, there's a chance that Hamas would have never invaded because number one, it would have been a deterrent. And number two, if they had invaded, there would have probably been less hostages taken. That being said, and I understand, I try thinking of every argument. The hole in the argument would be that people wouldn't have been bringing AKs to there was some sort of belief like people were drunk and there's partying going on, where many of the Israelis were captured and taken into and kidnapped. There wouldn't have been probably many guns there anyway, but there would have probably been some. So it would have been a deterrent there. That could happen in our country, honestly, through the southern border. If we get another president in who's weaker on the border, that could very easily happen. Or we could have sleeper cells right now. In the case of a sleeper cell, it would be good to have protection and be able to guard yourself. Secondly, like I said, in case of some sort of tyrannical government takeover. And I want to be very careful in what I say right now, because I know our country right now, I don't want to put any more wood in the fire, and I don't want to stoke the flames right now because it's pretty bad. But we're supposed to be guarded against tyrannical government. If you think Donald Trump's a tyrant, you don't know what a tyrant is. If I'm not a Barack Obama fan, but if I think Barack Obama is a tyrant, I don't necessarily know what a tyrant is. A tyrant is somebody who will literally imprison you, who will literally send you off to a camp to die if you don't follow his orders. Literally, right? So if you're listening and you're like, oh, Donald Trump would do that. No, he wouldn't. Because you have, in our country, you have a court system. You have the right to trial by jury. So that would not happen to you here right now. But if that ever happened, say our country went communist, and that's the purpose of having better guns. Sure, the military is better equipment, but the military can't go against 390 million guns in our country. And many people with multiple guns, many people even with unregistered guns, they would have a very difficult time. Or if, say, a foreign government tried taking over, they would have a difficult time if people had assault rifles over, and I use that loosely because whatever you want an assault rifle to mean, over just a pistol. So that's the whole entire purpose. Would we limit some gun deaths? Maybe, but there probably would be other types of death that would arise. So now, if you're somebody right now and you say, and if you're someone that's conservative, you need to think of what the left is going to say so you can have a rebuttal. Those of you that are on the left, here's my rebuttal. If you think that we should maybe get rid of all guns, okay, get rid of pistols. Maybe you're saying, I don't believe in that. Like it was an organized militia they were talking about. Okay, I can give you that. So what's the practicality of getting rid of guns? Since I just quoted that number, there are 390 million guns. A lot of people say, let's do government buybacks. How is the government going to make sure that every single gun is bought back? I'm telling you, not everybody's going to hand in their guns. There are plenty of unregistered guns. Criminals in the cities, that's most of our gun problems. Most of those guns are not reported, right? So you would be taking guns from people who are lawfully registering them, and you'd be letting the people on the streets with guns continue to shoot up places because they have unregistered guns. So that would not even solve much of the problem, because the people that are the criminals still have the guns, and now all of a sudden the people who are not criminals don't have guns and they can't defend themselves anymore, and it gives the criminals an opportunity to exploit private homeowners in other locations. So and number two, I'm very much a literal, I believe in our Constitution fully, and I believe it should be literally interpreted. Like there shouldn't be any stop or abridgment that means hindrance to us being able to get weapons. That's basically what the Second Amendment teaches. And I believe as a Second Amendment supporter that we shouldn't give up our guns, both for our protection, right? And by the way, going back, some of you might say it's worth it if we limit gun violence. Is your safety more important than your liberty? I want to pose that question because it's a question you have to answer for yourself and think deeply about. Is your safety more important than your liberty? Is your children's safety more important than their liberty? A government that makes everything 100% safe is neither free nor safe. What do I mean by that? A government that eliminates every single threat of opposition, what they're going to be is they're going to end up forming the opposition. So you can look at Australia during the COVID-19 pandemic. They were forced to give up their guns, I believe, in 1998. That year might be wrong, so you can fact check me. But I believe they were forced to give up guns that year. During COVID, they were only allowed to drive a certain distance in their cars because of what they did is they exchanged freedom for safety. So they might not get COVID, but they have no freedom of movement or travel. They have no freedom for their body to decide what they're going to put in their body or what they're not going to put in their body. There's no medical freedom. So when you sacrifice freedom for safety, you're neither free nor safe. So keep that in mind. When next time you're like, oh, I'm willing to take that trade-off. Is it going to be worth it 50 years down the road? Was it worth it over COVID? Ask yourself that. Was it worth it? You had to wear a mask. You couldn't go in the stores. You couldn't go to church, right? In many states, I know it depended on the state that you were in. And you couldn't do many tasks that you would normally do. Kids couldn't go to school, and they had their learning completely messed up. Was it really worth it for them to be safe? Because I'd argue for most people that the safety, basically the safety they had came underneath what they would actually lose. They lost many children, because I'm a teacher and I've taught, that were in the lower grades, like first, second, third, fourth grade during COVID. They essentially missed almost 2 years of schooling. And was that really worth it? Them being safe? Because most of them, that age group, would have been fine anyway. Was it really worth it for a whole generation to lose their education temporarily and become more illiterate? I don't think so. And we have to make sure that in the wake of all this violence, there's going to be a giant push currently, as there already has been after every single school shooting, after the shooting of Charlie Kirk, after the shooting of Donald Trump. There's always going to be a call on the left, hey, let's eliminate guns. But I'm posing the question, does eliminating guns really solve the problem? I've gone through some logic. No, because what we do is when we get rid of guns, we exchange one form of our safety. We get rid of one form of our freedom for safety. So it makes us actually less safe. And we're inherently more prone to the government becoming tyrannical, right? Because there's no threat of opposition. So that's one reason that I am pro-gun. The second is for defending our houses and our families. I think that's a right, a universal right that should go to every human. You should be able to defend your property. You should be able to defend the people you love and defend what you've built up, your house, your wealth, and you should be able to do that without fear of somebody coming into your house, breaking in, and you not being able to defend yourself. So that's extremely empowering, and it also allows you to live with some freedom of thought, right, and freedom of mind, and also actually gives you more safety, because if you know you have a gun, you feel more safe because you can protect yourself against somebody else who has one, right? So that's something to consider. Number 3, we could not eliminate all the guns through buybacks if we wanted to. Illegal guns, unregistered guns would still be on the street for sure, and that's what most of these gangbangers are using. They're not using registered guns because they don't want to be tracked by their state. So that's first and foremost. And they don't want to be tracked, so you're not eliminating the real problem. And there are just many guns that are still going to be available anyway. So I think there's way more trade-offs. There's way more cons than pros. You could look at other countries and say, man, they have way less gun crime, way less mass shooting incidents. You could go to Japan. They have like no guns there, and they have a very low crime rate. However, they have very, very little guns. And also, if the military ever wanted to become tyrannical, there would be no resistance because they wouldn't be able to resist. But the biggest thing is they don't have guns there already too much. Their police officers don't even have guns. So they never were a country where most people had guns. The United States has a much greater population than most of these other countries. There's more guns in the United States than people. So the practicality of getting rid of all those guns is very difficult, especially since it's legal. you have many illegal guns on the streets that you're not going to be able to get rid of. So the best protection against guns is actually having a gun. So it's a shame this LDS church in Michigan, which I'm assuming has relatively strict gun laws, probably not as strict as where I'm from, New Jersey, but relatively strict. It's a shame that there was nobody that I know of that was able to shoot the intruder. They probably were all caught by surprise, and who knows, maybe the truck injured some of the security. But we really have to take a deep dive and think, is it really worth exchanging my personal freedom for safety? And as we've discussed, there's going to be more that comes out in the following days. This man's motives, maybe his family, the people around him, whether they knew there was a change in him before this happened, whether there was some sort of religious background. Maybe he was a religious man and he didn't like Mormons. Maybe it was some sort of PTSD that he was dealing with, and it made him go insane and kill these people at this LDS church in Michigan. I don't know. We're going to find out in the coming days. But one thing I can say definitively is resist the urge to give up your freedoms. Because when you give up your freedom, you are neither free nor safe.